Welcome to the Richmond Film Network Podcast, your all-access pass to the world of independent cinema. Each week, we go beyond the credits and sit down with the creatives who turn vision into reality. Tune in weekly to find out who's on the RFN pod.
Hello, and thank you for tuning into the Richmond Film Network Podcast. I'm Lisa Giles, and with me today is the director of the feature documentary, Faith Healers, Regina Aquino. Welcome, Regina.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
So Regina is an award-winning actor, producer, director, and founder of Origin Stories Productions. Her theater career spans 22 years. She's performed on all of Washington, D.C.'s prominent stages, including the Kennedy Center and also at Lincoln Center in New York City. She's been nominated for multiple Helen Hayes Awards and in 2019 earned Outstanding Lead Performer in a Play for her work in The Events. She's the first Filipino to receive the distinction of Washingtonian Magazine's 10 Biggest Theater Stars of DC. She founded Origin Stories Productions to create Filipino-forward art, and her first feature documentary, Faith Healers, was selected to world premiere at the Manila International Film Festival at the TCL Chinese Theater in Hollywood in March, and it made its East Coast premiere with RFN Indie Fest just last week. So congratulations on Faith Healers and its Audience Choice Award at RFN Indie Fest just last week. So what inspired you with this big theater career? What inspired you to take that big leap and step behind the camera and tell this particular story for your first feature documentary? I mean, you came out guns blazing with the feature, first of all. So how did you decide to do that?
And thank you so much for hosting an Indie Fest and giving us the opportunity to screen so that we had the opportunity to win Audience Choice. We just received the award. I'm so excited to have it. It's beautiful. What inspired me, as you mentioned, I've been a storyteller for 22, 23 years now. And in that time, particularly in the last decade, a lot of my work has focused on representation and uplifting stories of communities that are underrepresented and making sure that I can use my voice and my talents towards that. And it became very clear to me that the Filipino community was probably the most underrepresented community in my artistic experience, because in my 23 years of performing, I have only played a Filipino on stage once, and that was 2 years ago. So when the audiences came out to see that show, the Filipinos who came, we had a sold out show at the Kennedy Center. I thought that it would be very meaningful to the children that would come. But what was very heartening for me is that the children saw bodies of color on stage and they were used to it. Not a lot of the children were super impressed by like a Filipino story, because I think Filipinos now are used to a little bit more than I was when I was growing up. But what really impacted me was the elders would approach me and the other Filipino artists who were on that stage, some of them crying, saying that they'd never seen their moms on stage. So I got to be a Filipino mother and a Filipino grandmother, and I got to speak in Tagalog and speak in a Filipino accent and sing a song and have like a big number for as a Filipino grandmother, as a lola. And there were so many adults who were just blown away by the fact that a mom was on stage, that their ate was on stage, their lola was on stage, and that deeply impacted me, because it made it clear that there's this whole generation, not just my generation, but like the generation before me, the immigrants, the elders who came, that have never seen themselves on stage and have never seen their experiences on the screen. And it made me reflect on the fact that I had spent my entire artistic career telling stories about other communities and other cultures that, that it was almost an injustice that my own community, of which there's so many Filipinos here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. There's so many that have contributed to this culture, that have never seen themselves on stage, that I wanted to use the skills that I've developed making plays and working with places like the Kennedy Center and Lincoln Center and Arena Stage. All of those skills, I wanted to use that and put it towards uplifting Filipino stories. And one of the things that deeply bothered me was the fact that I knew there were Filipino doctors who were invited to America in the 60s because there was a physician and a healthcare shortage because of the numerous wars that America had engaged in. There was no funnel for healthcare workers in universities. So they opened up the borders to Asia for the first time and invited skilled workers and medical professionals into America. That became the path for my family to come and take root here outside of Washington, D.C. And I grew up in a community where there were so many Filipino doctors that were taking care of like a 10, 20-mile radius outside of D.C. in Maryland, that I thought all doctors were Filipino. Like, that's how many Filipino doctors I grew up around. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized, oh, this is just a special community of people that grew and nurtured this area and are still contributing by opening up restaurants and working in the government. And people don't know about this community. So I thought, why not tell a story and help uplift these people who have contributed so much to American healthcare and contributed so much to the nation's capital, and provide recognition to immigrants who came in the 60s who are now much older and in their later stages of life, and show them some appreciation for their contributions to American history. That I thought was, it's just a very meaningful way for me to pivot away from using my skills to tell other people's stories and taking them and honing them and focusing them on a very direct community that I am in contact with, and uplifting that.
So you're talking about your skills from your time on stage. How do those skills translate from that background in performance? How does that shape your approach to directing and producing Faith Healers?
Yeah, so I had no experience making films whatsoever, other than as an actor. And I think that actually became an asset for me, because I approached filmmaking not from like this very regimented, you have to do it this way, and you have to, like all of these structures that I'm assuming people teach you in school or that you learn on set. I came from a very collaborative place. As a theater maker, I worked on a lot of new play developments with the Kennedy Center. It's the best idea in the room wins. It's not about who is the playwright or who is the most tenured actor, who a director as like as somebody who calls all the shots. Like, I approach directing, even in theater and in film, as I'm sort of like a curator of a museum where everybody is an artist and they bring their own ideas and their own perspective and their own excellence. And I'm just able to see the big picture and help hone that story and uplift everybody's skills. So in taking that collaborative nature, I was able to find a production crew that completely understood and aligned with the story that I knew we were trying to tell. Like, I was very clear about, it was such an interesting learning experience for me because I'd never sound mixed before. And I was terrified going into the studio for the first time doing live mixing with our sound designer, our sound engineer. And I was worried that I wouldn't know how to talk to this person. And as soon as we started, I knew exactly what to say, because I spent so much time working in a different container, but in the same story development process, that it was already a second nature to me. I was able to communicate the soundscapes that I was hoping to achieve and the emotional quality that a specific moment was looking for, and finding the dialogue with each designer, with my composer, with our colorist. And I think a lot of that just came with being very clear on the emotional journey that I wanted the viewers to experience. It just came from that. It came from a pure, like, what does this story call for, and how do I find the purity of the moment, and find that collaboratively. I think that's how my approach in theater informed my filmmaking process, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. So, as a first time filmmaker, what were some of the most surprising or challenging moments during production?
Wow. And this is coming from like a documentary standpoint, right? Like, which I know is very different from narrative. I had an idea of what I wanted. I knew that the story would tell itself based on the information that I got out of the interviews. I had to be very clear about how I was engaging with the people I was interviewing and allowing them to tell their story, while also being very specific about the experiences that I was trying to extract from their lives. But I didn't have a script. So I built my script from the footage that we shot, and we shot over 26 hours of footage. That production process of like watching 26 hours of string outs and finding the commonality and then threading that together, like the initial rough cut of this film was 4.5 hours long. And I was the script and the sound bites that I had pulled out from all of the different things. I did not know how I was going to cut anything because I thought all of it was so great. Like, this is so important. We need to talk about crab mentality. We have to talk about all of these different experiences of second generation. And then we cut it down to 3 hours. And I was like, how am I going to get this down? And I got it down to 2 hours. And I'm like, this is still not. And what's funny is when it got down to the last cut, where I knew that I wanted it to be under an hour and a half, like all the other producers and my editor thought that it was going to be difficult for me. But then it was like, at that moment, it was like, kill your darlings, because the script and the story was so clear that the moments that took just a little bit longer, even though I thought the soundbite was great, I'm like, we can use that in something else, cut it. And like I think it was my co-producer Francis who said, it's not like a kill your darlings moment. You massacred your darlings. Like, you took out chunks. And I'm like, yes, because it was not serving the story the way that it needs to, with the emotional arc and the pacing. Like, we need there to be a good flow. And that, like, I actually felt really good about. I thought that it would be more challenging to like let go of things. That was actually the editing process was easier for me than I thought it would be at the end. But what was super challenging for me, I think, it was my first time producing. And on the day before my first day on set, after I had sourced all, like I had fundraised enough to pay for production, and I had found locations, and I'd set up 2 weeks of interviews. At 7:00 the night before my first interview at 9 a.m., my interviewee canceled. And that meant the 2 other interviewees were also going to cancel. And then I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's like $5,000 down the drain. If we like I was literally for 2 hours before my first day on set as the producer, writer, director, I was like sobbing because I did not know what was going to happen. And I got up the next day and I was like, I have to figure it out. We're going to figure it out. So I'm going to go to set. And while I'm going to set, I get a phone call that my last interview also canceled. And it was just like health things, or what for whatever reason, it just was not going to work out that Monday morning. No one wanted to be in this film. And we got to set, and set was somebody's restaurant. And my production manager called me. He got there 5 minutes before me. He said, there's another crew here. Like, what are you talking about? There's another PBS is here filming the chef. What do you? And so I had reserved the space, but there was miscommunication within the restaurant. So like everything that could have gone wrong on my first day went wrong. But like, there's nowhere to go but up from there, right? Because of the fact that we had nowhere to shoot, and that was beyond my control. My production manager called the founder of the production company and said, we have nowhere to shoot. It's beyond our control. They said, we're going to bank today, and you're going to reschedule whatever we were going to shoot today for a different day. And if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have been able to shoot on location at 2 doctor's offices that Friday instead of the Monday. So all of that happening, like, and the whole time I kept my cool. I didn't freak out on set. I freaked out before I got there, but I realized I'm the producer. I'm the person in charge. I have to make it happen, and I have to do it in a gracious way, because if I panic, then everybody else is going to panic. And it was like the universe was protecting me, because all of that time on location at those doctors' offices provided us with the verite and B-roll that we would never have gotten at this restaurant. And it was such an incredible educational moment for me, that realizing that, like, as a filmmaker, as an independent filmmaker, I can plan everything as much as I want, and things are going to happen and I have to fix it. And that is in no way a reflection of my skill or of my ability to, like, make things, or of whether or not it's a, like, it's, you just have to, like, let it go, figure out the best way to make it happen, and get the shots that you need. Because 9 times out of 10, when you do pivot, it turns into something better than you had planned. So that was, like, my biggest challenge, but also, like, the biggest gift, that like you really have no idea what's going to happen, no matter how much you can have contracts signed, and, like, but something could potentially happen that prevents you from getting to that location, and or that location might flood that day, or whatever, like, the sprinkler system turns on, who knows. But, like, you pivot, you make do, and in the end, if you can do it with a light heart and keeping the morale of your crew together, you can make something better than you imagine.
So you touched on the fundraising piece. Tell us about how you got the funding to make the film.
Absolutely. It's so funny. I think with artists in particular, with creatives in particular, I think that fundraising is such a challenge, because we're not really taught how to do that. It's like in acting school, nobody taught us the business of being an actor. Nobody teaches you what your resume should look like, or how to network, how to build a future for yourself with relationships. And most of my fundraising has come from relationships. We did a crowd fund for this film, and we raised $10,000 over what our goal was, because the community supported it. So I think all of my fundraising abilities are really just rooted in grassroots efforts within my community, and finding alignment of the mission of the film and businesses or investors that exist in that same space. So my executive producer is actually a physician. So my film is about doctors and immigrants who came in the 60s. And the way that I found him was just talking about this documentary that I was thinking about making one day at an AAPI event less than 2 years ago. And in talking about this film that I had just dreamed of, he said, "You have to make that film, and I'm going to help you." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, I'm a physician, and that's my parents' story. My mom came here as an immigrant, and she came in the 60s as well, on that same visa path that the star that Dr. Zorayda Lee-Llacer came on. And he said, "This is very personal to me, and I want to help you with this. So I'm going to help you fundraise." So I had an executive producer. I had no idea. And he's like, "You're going to make this film." I'm like, "I'm an actor. I've never made a film before." He said, "You're a filmmaker now." And we did some shots at the bar, and I'm like, "This is crazy." But, like, really, we sat down like 2 weeks later, and he's like, "How much money do you think you're going to need?" And I was like, "I don't know," but I pulled a number out of the ether, and he's like, "We can fundraise for that." I'm like, "Really?" And we just began fundraising. And he put some wind in our sails to help us get a production company on board so that we could shoot the footage. And then we fundraised the post-production through crowdfunding. And then I also went and looked for sponsorships in the Philippines. And that's something that I'm going to be doing for distribution. We have big goals of qualifying for an Oscar and running an Oscar campaign to hopefully get on the Oscar nomination shortlist. All of these things in speaking to a PR professional out in LA who is Filipino and works with documentary Oscar campaigns, he said you need at least $150,000 to run a campaign and host events for Oscar voters. And that's on top of paying for the Oscar qualifying run at a theater in an Oscar qualifying city. So looking for that funding, it's like, my fundraising and my goals have really been centered on who is a partner, what is a business, who is an individual, what are the partners that their livelihoods and their personal missions align with the mission of this film. So I will be going to the Philippines and looking at a couple of different companies that work for uplifting migrant labor. This film is about Filipino migrant workers and how truly Filipinos are the heart of the global economy. We are the caregivers of the global economy. We are also so many service workers in so many different industries. Not only are we caregivers of children and elderly and sick, we run cruise ships. We don't just run the cruise ships. We're steering the cruise ships. We are playing the music and the bands in the cruise ships. We are the servers in the cruise ships. We are in every single industry. So finding alignment with organizations that are about employment, I already have a lot of interest in partnering with them so that they can help fund distribution. So that's been my approach to fundraising. I will be applying for a grant here in Arlington, Virginia, but we live in a moment where arts funding from the government is limited. It is being shut down, and the arts in many ways are being censored. So I think that it behooves artists to look beyond the traditional ways of looking for funding and approaching it as an independent, like you are an independent artist. Like there's so much of what visual media and film can do to change the perspective of people in the world. Like you can truly, I think, impact the way people view Filipinos as a whole by creating Filipino content that uplifts who we truly are. And it's really just been about finding people who align with that and are willing to contribute, from grassroots organizations like the Filipino Young Professionals, or like working with the PMA because they are also in the film. Like there are people who feel they feel an alignment, and they understand the need for a film like Faith Healers, and so they're willing to contribute. And it's really just piecing together money from those different sources. That's how I have fundraised, and that's how I'm approaching fundraising for distribution.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the story and the themes. In Faith Healers, it weaves together personal biography, community history, post-colonial analysis. So how did you strike that balance between the intimate storytelling and the political storytelling?
Yeah, I love this question. I find that work, the intimate and the political, to be inseparable. Everything that I do as an artist is political, whether I want it to be or not. And it's something that I learned over time as an actor, that, the majority of the work that I did was in plays that did not specify a Filipino actress. And oftentimes they were in roles that were assumed to be white. So in casting a brown woman or an immigrant woman in a role that most people perceived as white, it automatically became a political statement about the play. People were now viewing my character and viewing the play as some kind of commentary on race and gender and ethnicity or immigration, that had whether or not that was our intention. It could have just been that I was the right actor for the job, but everybody comes into a play. Every audience member is going to have a different experience based on their personal experience in the world that is rooted in their gender, in their ethnicity, in so many different identifiers. So I became very keenly aware that no matter what I did in this world, it was inseparable from the politics and the identity that is assigned to me by society. And I can either lean into that or I can ignore it. But I believe that by leaning into who we are with complete authenticity, that makes us so much more powerful and makes our art so much more intentional. So everything that I have done in the past decade or so has really been about leaning into my identity and uplifting all the things that other me and questioning why that is. And so when it came to this film, looking at any immigrant story, it is impossible to remove it from where that immigration rooted. Like, where does that come from? And with the Filipino culture and our history, it's so unknown to so many people, and not just Americans, not just Filipino Americans, but also Filipinos in the motherland. I screened this film for some people, for my family in the Philippines, and there's this whole segment about the Filipino American War, and how that was so much longer than the Spanish American War, and the atrocities that happened in the Philippines, and the way that the Philippines was portrayed in America during that time. The Filipinos there had no idea about any of it, the same way that Filipinos here didn't know. So that was a big learning experience for me, because it showed how insidious the erasure of Filipino culture was, and how Westernization and colonization was so powerful that it even whitewashed what happened in the Philippines. They forgot how horrible the Filipino American War was, because they're so focused on now being a part of America's journey. So that to me, there's so much that I didn't know. And in making this film, I wanted to document all the things that surprised me, all the things that I think Americans at large should know at a bare minimum about how much Filipinos have contributed to the entirety of the United States of America, and how Filipinos should know that about themselves and be proud of themselves, and not feel like they are othered here in the States when we have been here since before the United States was a country. If Filipinos don't know that, then of course they feel, oh, we're new here, but we're not. We're not. And that was an important thing for me to get into the film. And how do I tie that into this very personal story about a doctor? Well, we just look at the immigration, and why is it that we don't know about the immigration and like the history of immigration? There's so much richness in each of our personal journeys that is rooted in our history that goes back to the Philippines. So that's how I merged those two together. I don't think that one can exist without the other, you know?
Totally. So speaking of the doctors, Dr. Zorayda Lee-Llacer is your centerpiece of the film. What drew you to her specifically, and how did your relationship with her evolve during the filmmaking process?
I have known Dr. Lee-Llacer my whole life. Her husband, Reynaldo Lee-Llacer, was also a physician and a surgeon. He was my godfather. So one of the churches that is shown in the film, that's the church I was baptized in, across the street from their home in Clinton, Maryland. So this really is about the community that I grew up in, and the people that took care of me and my family. So and then as time went by, like learning more and more about what Auntie Zorayda did, and how she was the first female president of the Prince George's County Medical Society, and all of these different contributions to American politics through medicine. We all knew that as a family. And then it occurred to me, I'm like, does the rest of the world know that Filipinos are doing this? Because she's just one out of many. And then, when you see the film and you see her face, and she's so kind, and she's so loving, and she's so humble. And her husband was the same. And the two of them were in love their whole lives. And they have 5 children who are just as wonderful as they are. And it just made perfect sense that she would be the star of the film, because you love her immediately. And she's just this wonderful person. And I'm truly blessed that they allowed me into their home so that I could I could document their lives, because they are such exemplary, wonderful people that I wanted to watch a movie about her. That's why I made it. She's just so wonderful. Richmond, the Indie Fest was the first time that we screened for a community of Filipinos that we didn't personally know. And to see them respond to her, and the fact that she was there, and then to find out, of course, like I reached out to them because I knew them as a cultural group. This group of Filipino dancers, Sayaw Diversity, came. And then, and I had met them, and they were just so wonderful. And then when they introduced themselves to Auntie Zorayda, they said, "We're all retired nurses." I'm like, I had no idea. Like, her story touches so many different people, because I feel like every Filipino family has a nurse or a doctor or some kind of medical professional that can look at her and say, my gosh, this person from the Philippines, completely self-made person, completely changed the trajectory of healthcare in the state of Maryland. And in some ways, also the state of American healthcare for all immigrant doctors. I have to document that, like, that's so beautiful. She's just so special. And like, you saw them like fangirling over her. And I kept telling Auntie Zorayda when we were shooting, I'm like, you're a star. When people see your face on the big screen, they're going to fall in love with you. Then she's like, no. And like, she saw firsthand how people said, you're an inspiration. And that, every challenge that I came up against making this film was so worth it, because she deserves that recognition. And I feel like that nurse community also, in seeing her story, sees a little bit of themselves and what they've contributed. So yes, Auntie Zorayda is an inspiration, but it's also affirming to the work that they have done, which that's priceless to me. That's not something that I was doing in theater. Do you know? Like that's more of an ephemeral, amorphous thing that may or may not impact representation, but this has direct impact on so many different people, and that I'm deeply, deeply proud of. That's the dream. I think I'm still like processing what happened last week, and I know that it was like so quick, but like the impact seems so profound, and I was really blown away. So I'm thankful for the container that you created for us.
What about the impact on non-Filipinos? What do you hope that they take away from the film?
I hope that people walk away from this film asking themselves why they didn't know as much as they should about the American relationship with the Philippines, why they don't know about Filipino culture when we were a colony. And I hope that it unlocks a lot of things about what they may think they know about all of the other cultures. What do you think you know about Hawaii? What do you think you know about Puerto Rico? Like the way that the messaging around what are American territories or states, like, I hope that it makes people question what they know and inspires people to go learn more, because a lot of what we are taught erases the impact and the devastation that happened on those specific communities that's ongoing in places like Hawaii and in Puerto Rico and in Guam. Like the Philippines at least is an independent country now, but what has happened in Hawaii and is what is continuing to happen in terms of the extraction of resources and the limitation on their own indigenous sovereignty is an injustice. And I feel like if more Americans actually took the time to realize what the United States government did to those specific places, they might have different feelings about or different thoughts about America's approach to territories and colonies. Because I feel like people just don't talk about how America started as a colony and rebelled against that, and then went and started colonizing places. Like we don't review that part of our history enough. And I think that we need to start doing that, particularly in this time where we're talking about illegal immigration, undocumented immigrants, like who has a right to be here. because Filipinos have been here since before the United States was the United States. So why are Filipinos being detained and sent back if we were here before the government? Do you know? Like it brings up questions of like what is sovereignty and who is legal, who is illegal. Like I really hope that people walk away and start thinking about things like that. That is my hope. A little bit more curiosity and a little bit more appreciation for Filipino labor and contribution to their culture.
So Faith Healers is just beginning its journey, and you talked a little bit about pursuing the Oscars. But have you thought about beyond that? You had founded Origin Stories Productions with a mission to create Filipino forward art. So do you have your next story? Do you know what that next story is going to be?
Yes. I feel like as creatives, we always have so many different things churning. I have some shorts that I want to film, like little slices of life. Yeah, I was really inspired to make this film because when we're talking about erasure, even within the Filipino community, there's so much representation of West Coast Filipinos and like the Bay Area and LA. And then when we talk about East Coast Filipinos, it's New York and New Jersey. There's not a lot of representation about Filipinos in anything else aside from those two communities. So even when I, as a creative, was looking for community in LA and in New York, they had no idea that there were actors in DC. They had no, and I'm like, do you know how many Filipinos there are everywhere else in this country? Like, and I felt like our particular area, like DC, Maryland, Virginia, we are somehow like invisible. Somehow, like the Houston Filipinos get a lot more recognition than we do, the Chicago Filipinos. And like, I don't want it to be a competition, but I can't help but feel sometimes that DC, Maryland, Virginia Filipinos are just like not a part of the conversation at all. And that was also one of the reasons why I wanted to make this film, was to uplift this particular community. So I do want to make local work and to uplift the businesses here, the creatives that have been contributing, like yourself. Like, what are you doing in Richmond, Virginia? You are doing this on your own. Like, do you have a Filipina that did this before you that you can look up to? Because I'm assuming that you didn't. I didn't have anybody before. There were no Filipino actors here, and there were no Filipino filmmakers that I could look to here to help me build the company. And I started piecing together things in the way that I had to figure out on my own. So like, I want to tell stories about that, about Filipinos, Filipino Americans who are just living their daily lives and happen to be Filipino. And how does that inform what they do? I'm also like working on narrative. Like I've been given an assignment by a producer, director out in LA who wants to collaborate to come up with genres and themes that are interesting to me to create a narrative film to write and direct and produce and potentially star in. But like everything, I think like everything that I do wants to be rooted in my own personal experience as a Filipino, because that's my personal experience. So whether I don't want to make identity pieces all the time, I want us to just be human beings that happen to be Filipino. Like my dream one day is to make a dysfunctional Christmas movie where I get to just be a mom. But can you like Filipino Christmas is crazy, right? Like there are so many things going on and there's so much drama and it is so specific. So like having a camera and just following the different threads of a dysfunctional Filipino Christmas all getting together and like what does the food look like that. I want our Filipino-ness to inform a universal story, and that was what I hoped happened with Faith Healers. Even though that's a documentary and it is so specific, I was hoping to tell a more universal immigrant story. And my hope is that everything coming out of Origin Stories moving forward is about who we are in this moment and staying connected to where we come from. So like I'm an American in this moment, but I am deeply Filipino, and where I come from and where my family comes from informs everything that I do. So all the work that I produce moving forward, whether it's the travel, cooking, culture show that I dream of making, or the dysfunctional family Christmas movie that I hope to make sometime soon.
I think you're such an amazing example of having the audacity to pursue your dreams and doing it with no apologies. So, what advice would you give to other artists of color, especially Filipino creatives who are looking to tell their stories that feel deeply personal and culturally significant?
My advice, whenever I am asked, is to lean in to who you are, to be exactly who you are, and to trust your instincts, and to not make art that you think other people want to see, but to make art that you want to see. To tell a story that you feel deeply in your heart is important, because that ultimately, that passion will convey into every choice that you make about that project. And if you start making choices about what you think will sell or what you think other Filipinos will relate to better, it actually detracts from what makes it good. Specificity is the key to universality. The more specific I get in telling a story about a very specific human being and a very specific feeling, like just being very intentional about it, it opens up so much more. Be personal, be true to yourself, don't change who you are, and just like follow your gut with integrity. And that's what will inspire people to watch your work. Like your heart shines through everything. So I think as a younger actor, I often thought about like the challenges of being a Filipino, and like how it was going to limit me, and how it was going to prevent me from getting all the roles that I wanted. And then I got to a certain level in my career where I was getting those roles, and I realized, no, my dream role doesn't exist. My dream role is not me being the best Filipino Lady Macbeth, because like I'm being judged for my Filipino-ness in a white container. My dream role hasn't been written yet. My dream role is to just live as a person of my culture authentically without having to change it for anyone else. And I think that if I had learned that earlier, and I can't sit and say that I regret not learning, like it took me the time that it took me to learn it. But that's why I tell younger actors all the time, be thankful for what makes you different. Even though that you might feel like it limits you, that is actually the key to your success. What makes you different is your superpower. What makes us unique, that is where we can find our voice. So that is my advice to any creative, is to lean into your gut. Don't let anybody tell you that it's wrong.
Well, Regina, this has been super fun. Tell our viewers and our listeners who are interested in learning more about Faith Healers and Origin Stories Productions how they can find you and follow you.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Lisa, for having me and for having Faith Healers as part of IndieFest. Most of the stuff that I post is usually on Insta. I hate to say it. Social media is like how I disseminate information. Filipinos love social media, so that's how we connect. They're not reading newspapers, so you're not going to find an ad for Faith Healers in the Washington Post. But you can find us on Insta at Faith Healers Doc. We also have a website, but we are on the film festival circuit and we are working our way towards distribution, but we will be having community screenings in the future as well. So just follow our Instagram, Faith Healers Doc. Go to our website. It's on Origin Stories, which is my production company. And you can follow me too. It's regina.r.aquino on Instagram. That's Instagram. And you can find us on Film Freeway too. Yeah.
Thanks, Regina.
Thank you so much.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Richmond Film Network podcast. Thanks to our guest and to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share. Tune in next week to see who's on the RFN pod. Until then, keep the cameras rolling.